speak to any guy who coaches riders, whether they're racers, you know, or enduro or trail riders, you know, there's a kind of common theme in Australia in particular where we're obsessed with power, and that is the people are on bikes which have too much horsepower for them. Everybody's getting a 450, 500, to 300 two-stroke, and you know, by and large, what we found, and as I said, what any coach will tell you, is that that guy or girl is going to be better off 90% of the time on something with less power, more agility, more controllable, less fatiguing, and a hell of a lot more fun, which is ultimately what we're about. So, you know, we sort of believe in this so much that, you know, I think, you know, we've got a couple of 250s, 250Fs on fleet, on Transmoto long-termer this year, and two really significant bikes. So let's just take stock of them really quickly. So obviously the FE250, been around it, and its peers out of the Austrian factory have won a lot of world championships. For 2022, not a huge amount of upgrades, a little bit on the bodywork, gone firmer in the spring rates, and gone to a Braktec system for hydraulics, both brakes and clutch right throughout. Proven package, not a huge amount of changes. The Yamaha, on the other hand, Japan's finest, and in fact Japan's only real bike as a sort of hard-nosed enduro bike these days, all new generation bike. Massive changes to frame, subframe, engine, suspension, and then a whole heap of little parts like sort of triple clamps, foot pegs, axles, you name it. So we thought, what better way to actually sort of reinforce this point that, you know, people would have more fun on these, you know, I mean, these things are marvels of engineering, really. Quarter litres that can pump out that much power and go that fast, be that agile and that fun. So we thought, what better way to have a couple on fleet for a while. So look, we've been riding these things for, well, best part of 3 months now, whole lot of trail, all sorts of different conditions. We thought, you know what, we can't push these things to their limits, but we know a couple of guys who can. And so we hooked up with Scotty Keegan and Damien Smith, who are, you know, both guys who've represented Australia a number of times, former pro racers, won championships, and we figured we'd get those guys out on some sand tracks, some grass tracks, some bush, some snotty stuff, and get a bit of feedback from them about not so much which one's better or worse, it's not a shootout, but I think, you know, how the bikes differ in character, you know, who they're more likely to suit, what sort of terrain they suit, and, you know, why they'd own one. Let's have a chat to them. So, Damo, Scotty, first of all, boys, hey, great to be back out testing together. It's been a while, hey? You know, whether it's been COVID or weather, mate, it's been tough. But really good to get you involved. I know both of you have ridden and raced these bikes. You know, Damo, I think you've been on Huskies, and I think you even bought yourself a Yamaha a few years ago. Yep. Well, look, getting them out there today, and as I said in that sort of preamble there, you know, not about saying, hey, this one's good and this one's bad, because they're both magnificent bikes, right? Took it out today on a really sandy motocross track, that really slippery sort of wet grass track. It's a lot of snotty stuff in the bush, some hill climbing and stuff. So, you know, I guess the idea is to really give a bit of an insight into the bike's character and who they're going to suit. So let's start at the start, right? Quarter-litre bikes, engines, power, and I think, Scotty, maybe start off with you, because you sort of said, I don't think they're really different, but it's hard to articulate in your head, you know.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of insight into how the engines differ.
Just like the initial impression is just, even from the ergos and sitting on them, but from a power aspect, they're just completely different, like, characteristics in the way that they work. Really, the Yamaha felt quite linear, and it does have power there and a lot of mid-range sort of torque. That the Husky, a lot more sort of bottom end, like grunt, I would say, and then sort of
almost like it's got more flywheel.
Yeah, it does. Like it goes like initially it sort of got a good punch and then maybe flattens a little bit, and then like a lot of top end. Where the Yamaha sort of gradually climbs, and just always a bit easier for me to sort of keep moving, I think, on it, sort of thing. It was a bit easier when it was slippery too for me, because the power is sort of predictable, but just completely different.
And Damo, what, you know, you said, I think you said very pro-y like engine, you know, it feels like it revs up. You can actually even hear it when it's in neutral. You know, it's angry. It's a motocross bike, you know, with some concessions for enduro, right?
For sure. It's the Yami's it's a very, I call it a flighty engine. Like, it revs really quick. It revs, like, it seems like it works really good when you're in the top end of the power for me. Difference between them two for me is the bit like what Scotty said, with the explosive bottom end power that the Husky have. It's like it's a really punchy bottom end, and then it lacks a little bit in the middle as the Yamaha, but it lacks a bit of that punch as in the bottom end punch, but then the power just keeps going, like it just sort of a linear sort of power.
I heard you on the soundtrack you were holding third gear in a lot of corners.
Yeah, and it seems to like that. Like on the Husky, it doesn't do that. It'll drop off the power, and you need to pull another gear. With that, it likes it on the on the limiter. I've never been known to have bikes on the limiter my whole life, but when I had one of them, and today, on the limiter a bit on it, and it's a good feeling because it's like you're really using the bike for what it's for. Like it's a small capacity bike. It's
but you're almost riding it like a large capacity. I think I saw. We were talking when Damo was grabbing gears.
Yeah.
When you think you'd otherwise rev it because it's a 250, and you could see it surge forward, which is typically something you do on a 350 or 450, right?
Yeah, it did tend to sort of pull third and not need as many gear changes in that way for me. But I think that's more like what I said. That once you're sort of moving and you've got a little bit of a flow and momentum going, it's easier to sort of keep that pace carrying sort of thing. But
for me, it was like we rode the both bikes in some really really snotty stuff where you're tiptoeing hard to keep the thing upright, and that more tractable feel of the power, more flywheel weight sort of was better in the slick stuff for me.
Yeah, for sure.
When it was dry and hard and I was confident, knew where I was going, and I wasn't like, shit, this thing's going to step out of me. Like, the Yamaha engine, it's a really impressive power panel.
Yeah.
Like we all know the motocross, equivalent leads its class. So there's no sort of surprises, on that front. Well, we went to the sand track this morning, and that was really interesting, right? Because typically the sand track kind of, I guess, highlights chassis and any deficiencies or balance or hobby horse. So that was interesting because I think, obviously got an open cartridge fork, the Explorer 48mm fork in the Husky, and then a closed cartridge, pretty much a motocross fork. Sorry to say, open cartridge, and then the Yamaha with a closed or twin chamber fork. Quite a bit of difference. Scotty, what do you find?
Yeah, I felt like the Yamaha a bit more refined in the, from a speed aspect of holding up in the stroke when you're entering a corner, and it's obviously highlighted by the sand track and being a lot bumpier than anywhere else and hard hits. So it's a lot easier on entries to sort of keep your pace coming in because it'd hold up and your entry speed was better. So it felt like it was more race orientated in that sort of thing. But generally sort of a rough sand track's not the best spot for a stock enduro bike, but it's it's on that side of things. I think the Yamaha suspension was a bit better suited to that.
I think you said it was predictable. When you're getting sketchy and coming in the corner, you're a bit hot. You like the chassis felt more predictable.
Yeah, it always felt like it was knew what it was going to do, and the balance from the shock to the fork was good as well. Yeah. So I think that added to that predictability.
Damo, similar sort of thing. I know that you mucked around. You have the beauty is you got 6mm of fork spring preload that you mucked around with that to try and address that diving issue.
Yeah. I wouldn't say they dive. It's just a softer feel and a real hard reboundy feel on them. It's like a bit pogo-y for me, and I know these forks pretty well. It's really hard to get that out, and I think Yamaha's heads and shoulders above them in that aspect of they've got a motocross fork that they've refined to work off-road, which works quite well. I'd say it's a little bit it's a little bit on the harder side for me. It's got a bit of a hard.
Firm. It is going back to a 4.6 millimeter.
Yeah. So for me, if I was trail riding, it'd probably be a little bit on the hard side, and but on that sand track, I mean, you could ride these things all day around there, and as a quarter-litre bike, suspensions having really good suspensions unreal, but you could ride around it all day because you're not beating yourself up engine-wise. So, actually, always fun to ride. Like, it doesn't matter where you are on them; they're always fun. Like, it's because it's very rarely, aside from a 125, you can ride the things just wide open. And that's a good feeling. I'm sure everyone likes that,
Yeah. So moving on, after Smoko, we went out, and it was a pretty slick, this grass track's had a bit of rain, but typically that gives you an opportunity to sort of feel, the ergos, how you sit on the bike. It's quite different in the way you sort of perch on them, isn't it? The Yamaha, you sit at slightly lower bars relative to the seat, you feel a little bit more motocrossy aggressive.
Very aggressive,
a lot flatter sort of across the seat, not the tank, I guess. I guess the fuel cap, and across the airbox, and then to the bar. Lot different feel where the Husqvarna, you sort of sit down into it a little bit more. You feel like you're sort of maybe a little bit comfier, sort of thing. But yeah, just
That's sort of hard nose almost,
Yeah.
which is interesting because like 5 years ago, right, saying like because the bikes coming out of Europe were like hard nose, ready to race, and the Japanese bikes were kind of more of like an adapted trail bike, right? But now
Yeah.
there's much more motocross DNA in these blue things, right?
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You can sort of tell that too off even when you sit on them, that's sort of based off of like it is a YZ, or it's a lot more sort of motocross feeling than that thing. The Husky sort of feels a lot
Yeah, I
lot
mean,
mellower
to me the Husky feels like KTM Husky that we've always sat on. Like it's
Yeah.
very rarely changed. It's a comfortable, relaxed feeling on the bike, and that's what I do like that about these bikes, especially the Husky. The Yamaha for me, it's an aggressive feel on the bike when you sit on the bike, which for some guys it's great. For ex-racers, it's awesome because you can just get on and get into it. But that's built as an enduro bike, not around a motocross bike, like we talked about earlier. And you can feel that on the bike. You're like, all right, we can make this into a even better race bike if we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing, there's been with the Yamaha, it's had huge change in brakes. Got a 270mm front disc. They got, I think, 25% more pad area and done something to the caliper pistons. So these brakes now, I know some of the boys are racing with their thing stock. They no longer have to do anything else.
Yeah.
What do you think? They've moved to big changes here. They've gone away from Magura, both on the clutch and brake side, and they've moved to the Braktec system, which we first saw in the gas came out a year ago. What's your thoughts on that? It's comparative brake, and I guess we should be talking about hydraulics and the clutch as well.
Yeah. Well, hydraulic wise, the clutch on the thing on that Husky is awesome. And I've always been a fan of the hydraulic clutch, and I'm not a massive fan of the cable clutch on the Yami, just for the feel. It's got a long pull feel, you could call it. Longer
Modulate, longer take up. Yeah.
So I feel like I'd be more inclined to burn to hurt the clutch, not knowing, because you sort of might just have it on a bit. But with that, it's either on or off within a millimetre. It's like bang bang off on.
Yeah.
That it can be. You could be dragging it. You probably wouldn't know. So it'd be really nice if they could, just take that. It's a nice light feel, but it's a long feel.
But you're saying that from a pro rider's perspective. I
True,
can imagine a guy who's like, doesn't really use
Yeah.
maybe 4 fingers on the clutch, right, and
Oh,
take up a hill when he's buggered.
It's not heavy, it's not heavy or anything
no.
like that, is it? It's not.
It just can make it. Sometimes it can make it hard in some real technical stuff where you really just want to manoeuvre the bike with the engine, use the engine to manoeuvre the bike, and if you have to move the clutch more than to make it happen, it's not direct. Like that is it's like a light switch, on or off, or off.
And you can sort of use move the power around by.
Which for a smaller bore engine is not such a bad thing, right?
Yeah, especially if you're on when we're mucking around that snotty sort of hills and stuff, you can sort of just feel what it's going to do. And
But braking wise, the front brakes just feels like any Brembo front brake. I did boil the rear on it.
But it's you're saying the Braktec feels like a Brembo.
The front brake's fine. And have never been renowned for a massive front brake sort of guy. I usually use the rear a lot, so that's
And you did boil the rear.
hence the reason why I boiled the rear. So
okay. So there's some question
squeaky.
mark over that Braktec rear brake for me. I know there's a few guys with gases a year ago, so they had a few issues with that. So.
And Magura was the same. The Magura that they had on the year before wouldn't handle the heat like that some of the
And we all
old
know that the clutch safe cylinder was doing
Yeah,
bits and pieces as well.
yeah.
Look, today obviously, wet as hell. We weren't really standing the bikes on their nose in the picks, but we've had the luxury of having these bikes, and we've done that, and we've ridden in really tacky conditions. And I think probably the Yamaha braking package now has probably overtaken the Braktec / Brembo. It's super impressed with what that thing will do. Maybe something to do with the chassis is sitting up better in its stroke, like you guys said before. So let's talk also. I mean, I was marvelling at you guys. That snotty bush trail we did. With heaps of ruts and in and out, and it was really snotty. Marvelling at how you guys were just holding the wedge through there. I think we got some good GoPro footage. Take us through, Damo, what do you think in terms of differences of how the bikes handled in there? Because I noticed you guys are drawing quite different lines depending on which bike you're on.
Yeah, like I said before, they're such fun bikes to ride. Like when I used to ride 125s, it was like, oh, they're a fun bike to ride, but you can still go really fast, outright fast, you know. And same with these little bikes now. Both of them are really agile to ride, and they just, you know, they're light and they make heaps of power, and it's sort of enjoyable to ride, to be honest. Like it's fun, you know.
It's like a little breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it is. They're fun to ride. And going back to with the Husky, I personally always feel really comfortable on them bikes. It's a nice position to ride. I'd probably roll the bars a bit and change a few things, and you can, you know, there's not much between them in that aspect, you know. Like that's a little bit more racy feel for me, but you know.
A lot of people forget about the agility, you know, like you compare even a 250 and a 350, and just in that tight stuff where you know, it's kind of obvious, like curb weight, they're a kilo or two difference, but the gyro, like I think people, you know, like really underestimate how big a difference it is, and how in the bush, like non-fatiguing, accurate, stays in ruts, put it where you want it, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, it's a massive, even the way that it puts, that they both of them put the power down, being so mellow, like, and like it's easy to put it to the ground. Like, it doesn't tax your body, so it's easy to. You feel like you could sort of ride them forever at that aggressive pace.
It feels like it's not going to be like that, but you're less likely to get into strife. You know what I mean? Like a 450, even a 350 or 300 two-stroke, whatever. You get to a point and it's like, all right, it's starting to get a bit scary now, and I've got all this power. If
when
I
you're getting tired,
but these, it's like, hey, we're still cruising.
Yeah. So if you're riding not very frequently, if you're fatigued, if you're not particularly fit,
100%.
You know, and the fact that these things, you know, you save yourself a grand or two off some of the bigger capacity counterparts in each bike's range. You know, it's and I think I led off by saying a lot of people would be better off on these and they don't get it. Is ego getting in people's way? Is being able to talk about a fifth gear wheel stand at your mate's after a couple of skewies? Is that getting in the way of people making smart decisions about bikes? Because these things don't sell like those bigger balls in terms of numbers in Australia.
I think that's just a standard thing, isn't it? Everybody always wants to have the biggest engine size or the biggest dick or whatever.
Mate, in England, like the 250 is the biggest seller, I believe, and a few other countries around Europe. Snottier, wetter in general. Yeah. But hey, welcome to the east coast of Australia, man. I don't think it's ever going to get dry here, right?
I think we're turning England, but the ego, I think you're right with the ego thing, but also from my years and from what I hear from people is like, they don't realise how strong and reliable these engines are and how long they'll last, you know. Like they think, oh, if I get a 250, I'm going to have to rebuild it twice a year or this and that.
Yeah,
and that's not the case. These things will do, you know, considering...
I think bottom end bearings 135 hours of runtime or something crazy, and which is the same as 500 now.
And that's what people don't realise. Like
probably the recommended too. Like it's not the maybe not the route.
You could ride the nuts off these for all year, and you know you'd still be right. You know, doing their you got to do what the manual says, obviously, but.
So it's just a matter of getting some of those guys to ride and go, man, that was the most enjoyable. I kept up with the mates. In fact, I've smoked them through the tight stuff. Shit, we only did 10% of five trail in the day, and these things will do $1.60 anyway.
It's not completely destroyed.
It's very rare that if you own these bikes and you were riding them, it's very rare that you'd have a mate with a 450 or a 500 to come and ride it and get off it and go, oh, that's shit. Yeah. Most of them get off and go, I've got to get one of them. I can just ride that thing.
I could actually ride the bike instead of getting ridden by
1K here, right? We rode it up at about 1,300 metres of altitude. And same thing, loved the thing, agile, and just went to open up in 6th gear up a hill, and it's just like atmosphere. That altitude really affects them. So, which you understand, it's a quarter-litre thing, right?
I reckon that could be overcome too by putting the aftermarket exhaust and de-restricted a little bit because they are pretty choked up. Yeah. Especially Yamaha, it feels really. Still makes so much power, but it just feels like it's.
Still being held back a little bit.
I think you said they've had the same muffler for about 10 years now, on WRs. Let's talk a little bit. Well, we'll have some stuff on the website sort of going through and itemising all the various features that these bikes do and don't have. And it's just, we'll be here for 20 minutes talking about that. But we put them on the scales, 3 kilos difference. So give or take 107 for the Husky, 110 for the Yam. So much closer than before. By the time you take the lead acid battery out of that, take that big heavy muffler on the thing, that would account for the differential between the two. Yeah. So for the first time ever, where you've got a genuine hard nosed motocross bike without stupid ADR and all shit hanging off it, which is just weighing it down. How do they feel? Do they feel like the Yamaha claims that all the weight's centralised? Do they feel like they're sort of both light, or did you get any
They
sense?
feel really light to me.
Yeah.
That the Yamaha does feel does feel balanced. It feels. Well, they all say central mass or whatever it is, but it does feel like a very balanced central bike. And that's what I felt when I had one. To be honest, it was. You never had front too much front heavy feel or rear feel. It was just always felt pretty nice. And I suppose that's because they've put all the weights in the middle, the tank and engine.
And interesting, when we did that weight bias, I think we had 53% was on the arse end with the tank full of fuel versus about 51%, which might not sound like a lot, but they're kind of like changing the head angle by half a degree. It's quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the Husky for me felt a little bit lighter. You could feel it in the way that it's sort of in maybe the tip weight or something like that. Did feel like it was a bit
I'd agree.
Yeah, a bit lighter, but in saying that, the Yamaha feels a lot more planted too, like a lot more grounded and a lot more balanced.
I was going to say, watching you in the sand ruts, like you'd take a few stabs on that. Maybe it's because I think it was a little bit more hobby horsey coming in to a sandy moto track.
Yeah.
But when you had those sort of snotty ruts in the bush where you had to lock in, it was just like set one line. Whereas you're doing a little bit more, taking a few corners.
I think the Yamaha sort of once it's locked in, you can rail through. But yeah, like we did muck around with the adjustment on the forks too once we got back to the sand track, and that that made a bit of difference too, because it was holding up a little bit better. And it's not like we said, it's not a bottoming issue. It's like initial dive
progression, right?
Yeah. It's just like being slightly like that or slightly back. So it's
I saw the rear wheel, the Husky's off the ground a little bit more. I mean, there's some pretty gnarly big braking.
Yeah, that's as rough as it could get. That's pro level track, like, for sure.
Yeah.
And we were pushing them pretty hard. But what I'm impressed with both bikes, suspension wise now. Generally, years ago, you buy an enduro bike and it's like, all right, you're going to hit something hard and the forks are going to go clunk and.
But years ago you wouldn't have went.
That's
you wouldn't
it.
even go to a race with that.
Both of these bikes, you can't.
Could be raced as is.
Well, you can. There's no massive bottoming. They won't go clunk out of the thing. They just seem to get firmer and firmer to a certain point. Even watching, that has a soft feel, but watching when Scotty was riding it, he's still not using all the travel. So there's something there. So they don't want them to go right through, obviously.
It's an interesting point. So like all of us have the luxury, or I think you bought a bike recently, first time in 30 years or something, right? But most of us have the luxury of getting bikes cheap or free, right? So, but when people are comparing these two bikes, and we should say, like the Husky rack rate 15, give or take, 13.3, so $1,700 different. The 2022 Husky model at the moment's got a $1,500 special discount at the moment, so give or take, they're around the same, 13.3, 13.5. But when someone's looking at these two bikes, and if someone's justifying in their mind, I heard a lot of people going, I want the Yamaha because it's got a closed chamber carbon fork, and in their minds that's worth a lot more, right? Like, are they right in saying that? I think what we've said today is it's a firmer ride for the sit-down trail ride guy. The Yami might not be quite as plush, or maybe Husky doesn't need that, right? But if you're a pro level guy or a faster guy or a heavier guy, you know how to push it. That suspension gives you more versatility. You can push it harder before it finds its limits, right?
Yeah, definitely, and it seems like it likes to be pushed. You can obviously ride it. You can trail ride it. It's fine. It does everything good, but it still likes to be pushed. Like, I don't have an issue with pushing the fork as hard as you want it to push it. So on that side of things, and it's a really benefit from probably exhaust. A muffler at least. It does feel a little bit choked up, sort of like it's just still a bit restricted through that pipe, but I think that'd make a massive difference.
So it sort of evens out. Like, if you put a exhaust on that, it's going to cost you $1,000, and you've got you probably don't need to change the exhaust on that. It doesn't seem that choked up, but it could benefit from it. But then you could spend money on the forks as well. Like, if you knew anything about suspension and components, you would go. Money-wise, you would go for them forks, 100%, because they're a brilliant fork, and they have been for years. They're a lot better than they were, but they still can be better. And I think
the WP,
I think there's.
But do you think if you were
It's
just
changed too much.
if you were
Always
just
changing.
trail riding on that, would they be?
That'd be fine.
Yeah,
yeah.
they'd be fine because like initially they're so plush that it's like
Yeah.
you're on a cloud.
Yeah,
like it's
they are nice.
Yeah, and look, WP's got that 6500 cartridge option. I think it's $1,950 or something like
Yeah.
that. Which it's still a lump, but
Yeah.
we know we've tested ourselves. I know you've got some in some of your race
Yeah.
bikes.
Yeah.
They're great. So, look, putting money aside, just which I said we got the luxury of doing that. But how do you sell this bike to a mate? Right? Is a trail rider guy? Which do you point him in direction of? A racer guy? Which do you point him in direction of, and why? Or is it not that simple? It's not like,
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, for me, bang for buck, the Yami for sure. Like if you're talking dollars and you want to save money, and you'd be happy just to ride how that thing is. If you're going to save yourself nearly $2,000, well, you do that aside from the run out, but
yeah,
it's run out anyway. So,
yeah.
but bang for buck for sure, it's heads and shoulders above it, and that's just I don't know why there's such a difference there, but But then there's people that like Huskies, there's people that like Yamahas too. That if I was going to sell it to a mate of mine that wanted to buy a bike, a brother-in-law or something like that, I would say, if you want to save money, go for the Yami.
But if he's a less experienced guy, it's easier to roll on the power on the Husky. Yeah.
There's a thousand questions there.
Very different personalities. Two incredible bikes. And I think the one thing we all agree is like way more people should be on these things, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cheap entry price, nimble, way more power than you ever thought before.
Cheap too, wouldn't it?
Cheap reg, come home with a smile on your face. Don't have your arms ripped out of your sockets, and you're not flapping around all day. And best of all, you can upstage your mate on a 500. Is just give him a prod in the ribs down the pub when he's telling some bullshit story, but you just tailed him up. Anyway, hey, thanks heaps, guys. It's awesome to come out here riding. We've had plenty of precipitation, so there wasn't any dust today, but good to get back on board with you guys, and thanks for all your input on these bikes here. Two bloody good things, and all we can say is go and see your dealer, get a ride on one, because I think a lot more people will be on their radar, and they'll be buying one.
Yeah, definitely 100%. Come a long ways in the last few years too.
Haven't they?